Hello my dear children, hope you all are doing well. Today we will begin a new chapter from class 10 biology. Chapter 8, how do organisms reproduce? Rather asking how organisms reproduce, let's discuss why do organisms reproduce. Guys, reproduction is the process by which organism they produce its young one which looks similar to that of their parents and their siblings. They must look similar. That term is really important. It must look similar to that of their parent and their young ones. We learned in our previous chapter that every living organism they perform various life activities for their survival, without which they are unable to survive. They include respiration, excretion, transportation, and many more. So this reproduction is also a life process. But organism can survive even without reproduction. But still, organisms are spending time and energy for performing reproduction. So being a fact that reproduction is not that much important for survival, but still organism performs it. Let's see the reason for it with the help of a simple example. Imagine a situation by which every humans in this world are planning or deciding to cease reproduction. That is, today at 11:30 today, every humans in this world are planning to stop for reproduction. They are about to cease reproduction. Now what's going to happen? Maybe after like 70 or 80 years, or at least, or at the maximum 100 years, what's going to happen? Yes, you're right. There won't be any humans left in this planet. That is, the humans will undergo extinction. So the question, why organisms reproduce? The reason is simple, that to prevent extinction or to make the continuity of the species, organisms are reproducing, and also to replace the dead ones. So a question to be asked is that when an organism undergoing reproduction, will they produce the exact copy of their young ones? No, not always. Look at you. You have similar characters from your parents, and also you have similar characters with that of your siblings. But there are some dissimilarities that you find between your siblings and of your parents, right? Like that, organism when they undergo reproduction, they produces its young one which will be similar to that of their parents. So like that, when humans reproduce, human will produce its young one which looks like human. Elephant produces its young one which looks like elephant. So it must be similar to that of their parents. Now still the question persists. How this variation, what's the reason for this variation, these dissimilarities? Every information of your character, like your skin color, your body height, your physique, whatever be that characters that found in you is coded inside chromosome present inside the nucleus. Inside a chromosome there is a biomolecule called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. It has got every information. So during reproduction, DNA also undergo duplication. The process of duplication of DNA is called replication. So replication is also a metabolic process. So like every metabolism, DNA replication is also not free from any error. So when DNA undergo replication, there happens the chance of error. As more and more errors accumulate inside the DNA replication, it forms the variation. So we say that the offspring is a variant from their parent. We call the offspring in different names, like you can call them as Salah, Falah, Firoz, Dia. In different names you can call them, but in size it says they are just a variant from your parent. Is variant that much important? Well, we'll figure it out with an example. Assume a condition where the room temperature, which is 30 degrees Celsius, is rising high to a 70 or 80 degrees Celsius. It is for sure that a major population of the organisms will not be able to adjust this higher temperature, but still a part of population will be able to survive in that harsh condition, and they will be able to reproduce and produce its young one. So you can call those population which can still survive in high temperature as a variant, while the major population will be wiped out from the planet Earth. So due to that variation, which variation is that? The variation or the advantage which can able to adjust to high temperature, that's a variation present in those population, and with that variation organisms are well adapted to nature. So that's the essence of variation, that organism will be or species will be well adapted to the environment and hence more chance for survival. So variations are useful for every living organism. Now let's see different modes of reproduction. There are in fact two modes of reproduction. First one, which involves only one parent, we call them as asexual reproduction or uniparental reproduction, whereas the other one, which involves both the parents are involved in producing young one, we call them as sexual reproduction or biparental reproduction. Let's move to the asexual reproduction first. There are 6 different kinds of asexual reproduction listed in our NCERT book. They are fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, vegetative propagation, and of course spore formation. First one is fission. Fission, as the word indicates, is just the opposite of the word fusion. Fusion means union, attaching, so fission could be detaching, splitting off, ripping off. That's the meaning of fission. So fission is a kind of asexual reproduction by which parent cell split into form daughter cells. There are 2 different kinds of fissions. One is the binary fission and the other one is the multiple fission. Binary fission, as the name indicates, is a kind of asexual reproduction by which parent cells split into 2 equal daughter cells. Depending upon the plane of cleavage or plane of splitting of the parent cell, there are 3 different kinds of fission. They are transverse fission, longitudinal fission, and irregular fission. First one is the longitudinal fission. Here you can see the fission occurs along the longitudinal axis. Example are Euglena and Leishmania. Leishmania causes a disease called Kala Azar, also known as the black fever. There is a small whip-like, hair-like, hook-like structure, flagella, at the end of the Leishmania. So the fission occurs along the orientation of that whip-like structure. Whereas in transverse fission, the fission occurs along the transverse axis. Bacteria and Paramecium are examples that comes under transverse fission. Moving on to the irregular fission. Here the fission occurs at any plane. The best example is amoeba. Amoeba are amorphous, so you can divide or you can split amoeba along any plane. The second type of fission is multiple fission, by which parent cell produces multiple daughter cells. Example of multiple fission, you can find them in Plasmodium. Plasmodium causes a deadly disease called malaria. Moving to the second type of asexual reproduction, that is fragmentation. As the name indicates, fragments are there. Parent cells, parent body forms fragments. They are somehow broken to different fragments, different bits and bits, and from each bits a new organisms are produced. This is mostly seen in organism having simple body organization. Like the green algae, the most common green algae, Spirogyra. Spirogyra is having a filamentous-like structure and it somehow got fragmented, and from each fragment a new organisms are produced. Moving to the third category, that is regeneration. The fully differentiated parent body somehow got ruptures or ripped off or broken into smaller pieces, and each pieces regains its lost part. It's almost a kind like fragmentation, but here the major difference is that each fragments are regaining its lost part. It is mainly observed in simple animals like Hydra and Planaria. Hydra and Planaria is having a specialized cell called regenerative cells. With the help of these cells, they regain its lost part. Moving to budding or buds. Buds are nothing but a spherical structure, an outgrowth from the parent body. Budding are most commonly observed in Hydra. Hydra contains a specialized tissue cells called regenerative cells. These cells undergo a rapid cell division at a specific point in the body of the Hydra, so that it produces a spherical structure called bud, which protrudes away from the parent body. As the buds increase in size, they mature. Finally, they will detach from the parent body and will give rise to a new Hydra. So you can see that there are 2 types of reproduction occurring in Hydra. One is the regeneration and the other one is budding. Moving to the 5th type of asexual reproduction, they are vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is a kind of reproduction observed in plant which involves the use of non-reproductive part or vegetative part of the plant like the stem, root, leaf, etc. The most classical example you might have seen in bryophyllum. In the rim of the bryophyllum leaf, the lamina of the bryophyllum leaf, you can see many embryos. Once the bryophyllum leaf detaches and falls on the soil, new bryophyllum plants are produced from these buds. Nowadays, plant breeders and farmers are using artificial vegetative propagation methods like cutting, layering and grafting to produce newer varieties of plant for their agricultural purposes. The plant grown using artificial vegetative propagations are grapes, roses, bananas, etc. There are in fact certain advantages of vegetative propagation than the conventional seed growing. They are listed as: first one, the plant growing or the plant raised as a result of vegetative propagation will mature early. That is, they can bear fruits and flowers earlier than the plant produced from seed. Secondly, vegetative propagation is the only means of reproduction for certain plants like banana, jasmine, grapes, because these plants cannot produce a viable seed, cannot produce a seed. So for them, vegetative propagation is the only means of reproduction. And finally, the plants produced as a result of vegetative propagation will have the same genetic constitution as that of their parent. So nowadays, biologists and plant breeders in association with various scientists are extending the vegetative propagation to a much more newer technique called tissue culture technique. In tissue culture technique, the highly dividing cells are isolated from the tip of the plant. Those highly dividing cells are called meristematic cells. So the meristematic cells are isolated from the plant part and they are grown in an artificial medium. These meristematic cells will grow well inside that artificial medium to produce a cluster of undifferentiated cell called callus. These callus are later transferred to another medium containing plant growth hormones like auxins, gibberellins and cytokines. Inside that artificial medium, callus will grow to a new plantlet. Later, this plantlet is transferred to the soil and it will growing as a new plant. So the technique of tissue culture all occurs under very sterile condition, free from any contamination, occurs inside a laboratory setting. So from the meristem of a single plant, you can give rise to hundreds of plants. And hence, tissue culture is also termed as micropropagation. So next time when you find a plant which is suffering from any kind of infections from bacteria or the virus, do tissue culture technique. You can trust meristematic cells that it will be free from any infection. So you can save that commercially important plant by doing tissue culture. So from the one plant you can make hundreds of new plants. And finally comes the spore formation. Perform the activity 8.2 given your NCERT book by taking a slice of bread and keep them in a moist, dark place, a cool, moist, dark place, and leave it for several days. After say 1 week, observe the bread under a magnifying glasses. You could see a structure like this. They are the bread mold, the bread fungus. Technically, we call them as rhizopus. You could see the branching structure, that's the body of the fungus, call them as hyphae. They are the non-reproductive part of the fungus. Whereas you can see a blob on a stick like structure, a spherical structure at the tip of the hyphae. They are called as sporangia. Sporangia's function is to produce spores inside them. Spores are nothing, they are minute cells inside it. So as more and more spores are produced inside a sporangia, just like you inflating a balloon, as more you inflate the balloon, chances are for bursting. The same way, sporangia will burst. And once sporangia bursts, the spores will be spreading in the air and will be landing somewhere in the soil or any other surface. From there, new rhizopus are born. Spores contain a specialized wall, we call them a spore wall. The spore wall's function is to protect the spore from any kind of a desiccation or any other harmful condition.